All over the press, people are quoting these studies that say, wait a minute now, it's not guns. It's violent video games that's causing the violence. In fact, Mika Brzezinski on Morning Joe quoted this 2001 study. Others have been quoting this 2005 study. It involved scanning people's brains. And it showed that it's all the fault of the violent video games. That's interesting. So Tommy Christopher over at Mediaite decided, hey, why don't I actually look into these studies, research them a little bit, and find out what they actually say. Well, that 2005 study was done by Renee Weber, MSU researcher. And here's what they said. There is a causal link between playing the first-person shooting game in our experiment and brain activity pattern that are considered as characteristics for aggressive cognitions and effects. Well, that's interesting. That sounds pretty bad, right? And they go on to say there's a neurological link and there's a short-term causal relationship. Okay, fascinating. Then they go on to explain that this study was done on 13 people. German boys ranging in age from 18 to 26. Well, that ought to do it. Okay, how narrow is that study group? It's ridiculous to make assumptions based on that. But don't worry, I'm not the one saying it. Renee Weber's the one saying it. Quote, although there are probably more positive effects of playing all the types of video games and even violent video games, such as socializing with peers or improving cognitive and physical abilities, it is important that we continue to explore this causal relationship we have shown in this research. Explaining, hey, look, it was a small sample study, but you know what? We actually showed more positive effects than negative effects. Boy, ladies and gentlemen, they got him. Violent video games, so bad according to the researchers. But the 2001 report is the one that is most often cited, so let's be fair and talk about that. It's called The Effects of Violent Video Games on Aggressive Behavior. Okay. Well, there again, we have some interesting data. First of all, they do say, quote, exposure to violent video games increases physiological arousal as well as aggressive thoughts, emotions, actions, and decreases positive social behavior. Now, that sounds pretty bad. But then they go on to explain, quote, many of the studies included in the meta-analysis had statistically marginal significance, were methodologically flawed, lacked valid measures of aggression, or were not published in peer-reviewed journals. Oops. If it's not published in a peer-reviewed journal, it means very, very little. Okay. But that's not the best part. This is my favorite. So look, you can say, oh, it's shoddy science, or they didn't look at the right studies, et cetera, et cetera. But it turns out they didn't even read the whole report. If you read the whole report, you run across this fascinating comment. Quote, a wide variety of other factors are more important antecedents of aggression than violent video games, including child abuse and neglect, victimization, bullying, drug and alcohol abuse, exposure to violence in the home, neurobiological indicators, low socioeconomic status, and access to guns. Even the study that they quote say what is more important is access to guns, not the violent video games. Boy, conservatives, you really got us with those studies. It's a great article by Tommy Christopher. You should check it out.